I start recording. So hello everyone, welcome to our meeting. Basically, my name is Babak Zawani. I'm hosting here, and I'm trying to facilitate the conversation. And we're gonna talk about, as you can see, about the net zero energy building in here to make a little bit more practical terms, or practicality of the net zero energy. And I just, before we get into the conversation and setting the context in here, just wanted to say that that we are going to record this session and share it with on YouTube, as well as that if you have any question, I think because our group is quite small, and let's feel free to ask question in here. And if you wanted to have a discussion for the people later on to joining us, they can post their question and we can answer them after the session over. For those people who are basically seeing this video after the event is finished, or they've seen the recorded video, feel free to reach out to me, and then I'll post your later question to each of the speakers, and I'll engage with you. And if they want to answer that, I will have a conversation with them later on. Right, so let's get it started in here. Just want to thank you, our sponsor, the DN Building Services, especially Mr. Ahmed Kalantari, who has done a great job in Sydney over the 20 years in the construction space, and he has obviously sponsored the project of the net zero energy for Granny Flat in Sydney, and that's where we're gonna work on this one with him in this space. And basically I'm doing the business consultant roles, especially for the people or for small business owners who wants to have a new product, service, or business model. And this is something that's especially for people who wants to discover a new unique value proposition for the business model. So that's where the whole journey with Mr. Ahmed started from, having a coffee, talking about the business marketing for having a website and social media advertisement, turns to the conversation of and having a unique value proposition before we start marketing and building up something new and different to others. And then we build up the business model around that in order to be a more sustainable and scalable in a business term. So that's the whole net zero energy start from there. And we have been working together with a group of other peers over the 4 months. And we basically the concept of net zero energy emerged out of that conversation, and that's kind of a group discussion in the ideation phase and also in a business analysis kind of the phases. So pretty much what I can say is I really believe in this concept of the think globally and acting locally, and that's why we have an international kind of view in here, and the people around the world to have they're basically thinking about the concept. We're trying to bring it to Australia, at least for the small businesses, to having some different views in here. And also, as you know, that's the world has targeted reaching the net zero carbon emission by 2050, and that's where the Paris agreements comes in place. That's all 195 countries has signed off, including Australia. And in terms of Australian terms, I would say, the US one, I just came across of this through my research that the US, especially for sustainability building material, they're focusing on an efficiency, the Energy Star certification products. And also they wanted to have more product improvement from technology point of view to improve that concept, and also especially for building this material or manufacturing the materials that requires for sustainability. This is just to give you an indicator from the US point of view. I couldn't find anything specific to Australia from a statistic point of view, but it comes from the IBIS World report. That give us a little bit more indication from the US lens. In Australia, gladly has got target for reaching to net zero emission target by 40, which is 1 decade before the global basically target. And Australia has got little planning here. That's where the government, through the basically through the Renewable Energy Agency, has put together a specific fund for any organization who wants to do the basically zero energy efficiency house in a scales. So as you can see, there are a couple of examples as a big organization in Australia start basically piloting and testing the feasibility of net zero energy building, and one of them is a Fraser and a property, and also Mirwalk in Melbourne. Fraser has done it in the southwest Australia, and that was coming from 2019. And probably Ken has got better view on those projects than me, can give us a little more insight about that. But that's what we're having right now. So the whole conversation we're having in here is we're trying to bring this concept to the much smaller scale for a company like DN Building, who are smaller than anyone else in terms of the construction space, and we help them to start the small projects. It can be granny flat in Australia. That's why we're having this discussion. And I would like to, well, I'll leave the speakers to introduce themselves and what they do, where they're coming from, the company they're coming from. But I'm really honored to have you on this call. Unfortunately, Dr. Hamid couldn't join us from Netherlands. He's a little bit ill. Unfortunately, I just came across of that this morning. And Hamid has got academic background in the energy efficiency space, and he has done lots of researches, especially the proof of concept and the piloting and prototyping in the wind and also the solar systems. So unfortunately, we can't have him on the call, but the rest of the speakers will cover off the Hamid discussion. I'll let you to introduce yourself. Chris, so we start from Chris and Ken and Nafis, and then we jump into the topic.
Sure. Chris Williams. I'm with a company called Avalon Master Builder up in Calgary, Canada, and we're a net zero builder. Most of our projects, single family homes, and now we're doing more and more multifamily net zero. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Ken.
Good day, everyone. My name is Ken Long. I'm coming into the conversation from Ghana land, which is also known as Adelaide, South Australia. My background is in architecture and sustainable design, and my specific expertise is quite varied in the built environment, but it can range from small scale to single residential to multi-residential, and also all the way up to precinct level. So I have quite a varied experience across implementing sustainability across lots of scales of built environments here in Australia.
Thank you. Nafis.
Hi, everybody. Good morning from Bangladesh. I am Nafizur Rahman. I'm an architect. I am working in one government agency, so which actually based on the research agencies. And I was involved in the development of government policies, building-related policies, mostly the National Building Code, BNBC. And then I developed the Green Building Rating System for Bangladesh, Building Energy and Environment Rating called. And beside that, actually, I also work for Renewable Energy Development Authority, and so we also made some policies there regarding the building energy efficiency, building energy audit, and net zero energy building. So that's all about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. And I know for Chris, it's pretty late night. I really appreciate that. And Chris, you spending time on Sunday night.
Absolutely.
And let's get into the topics in here. Pretty easy in terms of the topics. We can go through that one by one, or we can have a conversation. For that, we will cover most of them, and then we can have a discussion with the panelists. So let's start off from the first one, which is a little bit more definition part, and also try to understand the value proposition from net zero point of view. What do you think of it as a kind of what is the net zero, and also what is the value proposition of the net zero? Started from Chris and Ken and Nafis.
Sure. Net zero. For us, we're talking energy, net zero energy. Certainly, embodied carbon and carbon neutrality is an important thing. But what we're trying to focus on right now is affordable net zero, sort of stepping our way there, trying to build awareness, I guess, and help people to understand sort of good versus better. But our focus on the projects we're doing right now is sort of operational net zero. And we're also trying to talk less about energy and more with what Babak is talking about there, which is it sort of goes beyond that, and there's a value that comes with it, which would be around sort of comfort and health. They're generally more comfortable homes because mechanical systems are right size. You don't have warm and cold spots. They're healthier because we're controlling the sort of air movement through the walls, and our air is coming through our fresh air systems, and they're generally quieter as well. So we try to talk more about that, because that's truly how or what people will I guess enjoy while they're living them in these homes. And it's again less about just the energy component and more about the livability.
Oh, thank you. Ken?
Thanks heaps, Chris. It's really important that aspect that you brought up around connecting it to kind of like quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also saying this from Canada. The North America has baseline minimum standards that are almost 10 years in advance of Australia. So in actuality, Australia is taking Australia and New Zealand as a construction industry is taking a lot of notes from what's happening in North America, and trying to actually hit those performance goals. And not only that, it's almost to like the detail of it. But in terms of net zero energy, essentially what we're trying to engage potential, not only end users, but also developers around, is that you're trying to create a situation where you're not necessarily energy self-sufficient. Ooh, sorry, is there feedback from me?
Not sure if anyone can put on mute, that would be great. Or from Ken.
So essentially, in a net zero energy home, you're trying to create a home that is quite efficient, energy efficient, but then that also ties into the health and well-being aspect of being comfortable, but at the same time being able to generate all the energy on site. It doesn't mean that you're off grid, because you can still be tied to the grid. It's actually probably better from a holistic system sense in terms of how we build our cities, that houses are connected to the grid and sharing energy. And from that essence, your sales pitch becomes that you're creating, for developers at least, you're creating a home that you're essentially going to have no energy bills. And in Australia, we have some of the highest costing energy around the world, so that becomes a very attractive proposal. But outside of like the environmental, financial, and the health kind of like aspect, I do also want to highlight that especially in the context around like Australia, the more that builders and developers don't think about net zero energy or airtight homes, things of that nature, it's actually a huge risk to all of them, because especially in a global sort of crackdown, essentially, since I guess like the Grenfell fires in the UK, liability in terms of how you're affecting your end occupant's health is going to be a huge issue. So what I'd be recommending in terms of the value proposition is it's not only in terms of being able to, at the moment, showcase a better quality product in terms of your sales pitch, but also in terms of internal basically guarding yourself against legal liability, you should actually also be thinking about this very strongly.
That's pretty good point, Ken. I never thought about the legal reliability of the net zero energy. It's pretty good to hear that. And Nafis, what do you think in terms of the government aspect of the net zero energy?
Okay, in our case, actually, we are our experience is differently. We are experiencing the net zero energy building system. Actually, last 20 years, from last 20 years, actually, our government is so if you consider the last 20 years, but they divide into two parts. 10 years back, actually, from the present government, actually, they tried to spread the renewable energies widely in our country. Actually, now, as of now, we have a 5.5 million of solar home system in our country. So actually, if you see that those home, actually, they are mostly, if you consider they're net zero energy building, because they don't use any fossil fuel and energy or alternative energy. So in that case, actually, but it also improved their livelihood, because before that, they use the fossil fuel like kerosene lamps and other non-renewable sources they used. But it changed their life. It introduced, it also helped them to develop the livelihood also. So in that case, unofficially, actually, we entered in net zero energy policies 10 to 15 years back. But now, officially, we are thinking about to so ensure the net zero energy building. So in this regard, actually, we have developed the net metering policy first. So the building owner or industry owner, they are now putting solar panels on their rooftop. Even mostly the garments industry, you know that we are the second largest garments exporter country in the world after China. So we have lots of garments factories. So the factories are coming up forward to introduce this sort of solar panels and net zero energy. Even they are also looking for net zero energy building, because they will get some incentive or financial benefit from their buyer also. That's why actually I think net zero energy building has huge potential, and also it's also if you consider that in terms of economics, it's also very important, because energy price will always increase, and in our case it's happening. So if they put the solar panels and they reduce the solar energy cost and go for net zero energy building and industries, then it will help them a lot to save their money.
I see.
So in that case, actually, we can say that net zero energy building, not only in terms of climate change and other things, it also economical part also, it's also very much valuable. Right? You can also tagline the
Yep. Perfect. I guess there's no question in that one, right? At the moment. And I do recommend you, after the meeting, obviously, I'll share another video that Ken has put together, which really clarifies the terminology and also the concept of the net zero energy and net zero carbon. And I'll recommend you to watch that one. We're trying to getting a little bit more impractical in here in terms of the net zero energy. So I just would like to everyone on the panel discuss about the cost-effective energy reduction. So how we can reduce the energy cost as much as we can in the kind of the building. It can be residential or commercial building. Is there any strategy from your guys? It can be, coming from the net zero by design. It can be coming from the, materials cost, anything like that. Chris?
Yeah, I think from a bigger picture, certainly design, starting in early stages and involving all groups from structural, mechanical, building envelope as early as possible absolutely saves for sure. And then kind of one interesting concept, I'm not sure if you can bring up that fourth slide that I had, energy reducing economics, but in that actually it'd be it'd be 3 more slides down. It's called energy reducing economics. That's the one. Yeah. Kind of an interesting concept when you in the early stages, when you get your energy advisor involved, where we actually break down what is your gigajoule savings or your energy savings per dollar, and if we start at the bottom there, you can see the solar panels for me on this one of the multifamily projects that we're working on. It's around $400 a gigajoule is what my solar panels cost. And then we compare that to some of the other items that we're designing into the home. So that jump up to the top, space heating. It's more expensive per gigajoule, but it's a huge gigajoule savings. And everybody can sort of read the other ones, but the big one that's in there, the $650 per gigajoule, this is Canadian dollars, drain water heat recovery. So if you're not familiar with that, what essentially is a copper pipe that you put on the sort of black water main that exits out your building. And as you're having a shower, you run your cold water across the outside, it pulls the energy out of it. We used quite a few of those when we started doing this because they're fairly inexpensive and they actually work really well. But when we looked at it from this aspect, it's cheaper for a solar panel, and the gigajoule savings wasn't that high. So it wasn't like the space heating where we're actually saving a lot on sort of real estate of solar panels that we may or may not have. And we took that out of our spec, but it was something that we put in every home. So just kind of an interesting, and you can switch away from the slide if you want, but just sort of an interesting way of looking at when you're reducing the energy your home uses. You have to do that first before we put panels on. And how do you get there? What's the most economical way to get there? So yeah, I'll leave it to everybody else too.
What I think is quite funny, especially being a North American, is that here in Australia, just in terms of like an Australian context, people still are trying to get their heads around why you want double glazing.
For the windows, right?
So like, for anyone that's not in Australia, this is where we're a little bit behind, because for some weird reason Australia has thought for a really long time that improving the external, like the building fabric of a home, should be last because it's like just because of the capital cost inclusive of that. But then those are probably some of your biggest wins is in the building fabric. As Chris has pointed out, those systems in terms of like the heat pump efficiencies, solar panels and stuff like that, all that can improve. But the big gap that's necessary here in Australia is that we need to actually improve the baseline performance of the homes as well, because you can have a energy efficient sort of like heat pump or air conditioner and stuff like that, but if you're running it all the time, because all of that heat and cool just like flows out of your house because you have single glazing, the air, even some builders over here get away with not even putting like a building membrane around. I know that's like sounds like blasphemous to someone in Canada, but like this is like the reality here in Australia, and it's like mind blowing. So that's just to add a little bit of like humor to this, where I'm not necessarily bagging all of Australian like builders, but there is a gap that also needs to be made in terms of just direct quality of build. And so like, for instance, when I've done a lot of return on investments for local builders, in terms of going from their stock standard minimum compliance to a net zero energy home, it's like, if you focused on just the building fabric, it was those things around, okay, making sure you have a really good building membrane, just like make sure that your insulation is just above the minimum compliance. You don't need R10 in the ceilings, the insulation value here in Australia. And look, just go double glazing in pretty much almost every climactic zone, because it just buffers that. Australia has extreme swings of temperature.
Mm.
And people think that just because we don't get snow here, you don't need double glazing. And it's like, it also gets up to 40 degrees Fahrenheit in some places in Australia. So like, it works both ways. And yes, that comes with capital costs. That being said, once again, if you're talking about quality, you're not only talking about the energy efficiency here, you're talking about quality of life, acoustics, thermal comfort, health and well-being, all that kind of stuff. That becomes like that whole package. And I think more and more people are being a lot more attuned to that.
Yeah, and durability as well. Like
Oh yeah, for sure.
Glazing, I suspect in high cooling months, single glazing, you've just got condensation pouring on the outside of the window, I would think. For us, it's the opposite. We've got condensation or frost on the inside, if that's happening, and all that does is that water just sort of destroys the wall. It's interesting. And sorry to maybe I'm jumping out of turn here, but one interesting thing that people always say is, well, what's the cost of these energy efficient upgrades, or what's the cost of net zero, or what's the payback? How long is it going to take? And the solar panels, for example, they're cash flow positive, like right out of the gate. Your granite and all those things that you're saying that people in Australia value first. It's the same for us. I got to make sure I have that right hardwood and the granite countertops and all those things, which and I like to sort of joke and say, well, those cash flow never, and they never pay back. Whereas these energy efficient costs actually do, again, they're cash flow positive if you consider the instant reduction on a monthly basis of energy.
That's interesting. And also the role of the prefabricator materials, because can you touch about the fabricator role in the net zero energy? How about the prefabricators, because it's became kind of a trend these days, right? I'm not sure what's your view on that.
Yeah, well, of course I want to make sure that we have time for Naviz to also kind of get in on this question, but
Sure, yeah.
just quickly on that is just in terms of the Australian supply chain reality, is that manufacturing in Australia is quite expensive, and currently there isn't the supply chain and automation to be able to allow for really good prefabricated materials. But that doesn't mean that can be an opportunity to make really good trade or supply chains that are a little bit more Australasia for these kind of components. But yes, there's a little bit of a two-pronged thing where it can be actually quite good. However, there's also some aspects around local training, but also circular economy aspects, because prefabricated materials are really bad in terms of circular economy, of making sure that we can keep materials in circulation throughout the economy. So, if we have metals, how can we isolate the metals so we can use them over and over again? Even like foam, being able to isolate it so we can melt it down and turn it right back into foam, those kind of things. So that really needs a lot more. Prefabrication has a lot of opportunity. It has yet to be done extremely well on a very residential scale here in Australia. Commercial is very different.
Nafis, do you want to add anything on this? Yep.
Yeah, actually, from my side, from our experience, that we have seen that the most cost-effective energy direction issues should start from the design phase of the building. So the first should the orientation of the building, because if you wrongly position one building in say east west or north south, then it will gain the huge heat. In our case, actually, because we are from a warm, humid climate, so. That's actually we need a more cooling load electricity for cooling here. So what we found, even most buildings are now, due to our economic developments, our GDP is continuously 7-8% last couple of years from. So the people are buying more and more air conditioner here in Bangladesh. So our energy consumption it increases certainly. So that's actually our now we are trying to impose this sort of energy efficiency measures in our buildings. Now we are trying to introduce the double glazing and say efficient air conditioning. But end of the what I found, even last COVID situation, my experience we experienced different way. We found that mostly people who lived in the air conditioned space, they get infected by COVID, and also the mortality rate also high. So now we are thinking, my perception, we have to rethink about this sort of energy efficiency issues also, because yes, we are getting more energy efficient equipment, but we also need to modify this sort of thing, because to focus on the health issues beside that. Otherwise, you will not get the appropriate sustainability. So in this case, actually, the mostly passive building, I think, if you consider the net zero energy building and energy saving technology, then I think passive design is the most effective for net zero energy building. Even the architect role is very important here, because architects are mostly responsible for this sort of design. So then actually we can pick the energy efficient technology which are most cost effective. So I think we need to combine those two things. And first one is the design, and then we have to select the appropriate technology. Then I think we can ensure the best thing for the
Thank you. I'm so glad that you touched on the design side of it, because that was my question to everyone. Can we elaborate on the design a little bit more, in terms of, obviously we are trying to cover this the net zero energy from builders or developers point of view in here. That's why we put the cost effective, but obviously there are some more angles into that from human side as well as the environmental side. But from design point of view, what do you think that would really reduce even the cost or improve the quality of the building from design point of view? Architectures, for example, the role of architecture, the role of a design rather than just materials. Can we,
I just wanted to jump in real quick, because I just wanted to thank you, Naviz, for bringing that up in terms of what are sort of like the dynamics, because, and it's really good, as a conversation, because I currently live and work in a hot and dry climate, Mediterranean. I'm guessing that Chris is in a little bit more of a getting closer to Arctic kind of like zone, but like very like cold is a big thing. But then you're coming from a place where it's a lot more tropical, and the design solutions to that has to really be different in almost every single kind of bioregional climactic zone. And I mean, it's the same thing in Australia as well. It's kind of funny because a lot of people don't realize how big Australia is. It has quite literally every single climactic zone in the world, because it has all the way from tropical all the way down to Tasmania is frigid. And the design of those homes have to change depending on where they're at. Like if you're in a more tropical area, airflow through the building is a lot more important for comfort levels, just being able to just get breezes through there, or even be able to facilitate breezes through. So how can you do that in a much more passive manner? While here in Adelaide, which is a little bit more dry, can be very hot but also cold. It's more about orientation to the sun and blocking out the sun when you don't want it, but inviting the sun in when it's the most applicable, and being able to shut that house down when you're in these extremes. So yeah, design is, there's no silver bullet for design, and that's why architects or designers that understand the local climatic conditions and to design according to that, and to install according to that, is really important across anywhere, even globally, and making sure you're tapping into things that actually, vernacular architecture knows almost best. I'm pretty sure in Bangladesh there's a really strong, very strong architectural language that has been there for such a long time. You just can't get rid of that kind of stuff, because that's like millennia of design data that like what works and what doesn't without electricity.
The climate is an interesting thing for us, Ken, in that we can go, we can be minus 30 Celsius, 30 degrees below freezing. We can sustain that for a couple of weeks, and in the middle of summer we can be plus 35 for many weeks. So it's a huge swing to design around, and just being where we are, the sun in the summertime is very high, very low in the winter, which is nice because we can design shading into our architecture, so that when we do have those high, I guess, cooling loads in the summer, we can integrate shading so that the sun's not hitting the glass. But then in the winter time, because the sun gets so low to the south, we can use that passive heating. But what we're finding is when we design for passive, and we super insulate our walls and try and allow for as much passive heat in, but keeping it in, is we end up with these really big cooling loads on these net zero homes, because they're so efficient passively. So it's just, you've got the extremes here that makes it very, very difficult to design around.
Cool. Before we jump into the next one, I just wanted to make sure that is there anything else that we can talk about, the cost-effective way to reducing the energy in a house? I think Ken touched on point of the air sealing, isolation kind of things. Is there anything else that we can cover in here, especially from experience point of view?
Just one thing, especially for sort of like, especially because this might go out to your network and stuff like that later, is a lot of people have this preconception, especially in Australia, that including let's take solar out of the way, because solar is such it's an easy win. You're actually, as Chris has already pointed out, it's a like OpEx, capital positive kind of thing. You're losing money if you don't put it on. So that's for the next question, right? But everyone thinks it's too expensive to think about these cost-effective energy, efficiency things. I will tell you right now that in the Australian context, for a single residential home, if you upspec the glazing, you upspec the insulation, and you thought about just a one or two energy efficient things like a heat pump and and let's just say a heat pump for water, and maybe even a high efficiency split system, that altogether will probably be under 5% of the capital cost. And everyone tries to say that net zero energy buildings will cost like a 20% premium, and it scares everyone off, because people are basically just, I'm sorry to say this, but just talking out of their ass because they don't know any better. It's not that expensive. It's really about, are you going to, as a developer or a builder, are you actually going to communicate real value that your client is going to get?
One interesting thing, Ken, that's right down that line is, and what we've been really focusing on a lot, is this net zero for $0. What does that mean? And so I sell kind of starter townhomes. So it's either somebody's first home, or they're moving from an apartment to a townhome. So most of my customer base, and I think the majority of people out there, are financing these purchases, and I'm not familiar with how the finance aspect works for home ownership in the other locations, but the way it works for us, and right now with interest rates where they are, is people will come in, they'll put 5% down, 95% of it's financed. So when you, and your 5% is bang on. Our homes are about 9% after the solar. So but with sort of net zero ready, so before you put the solar on, we're definitely in that 5% range. But when we take that 9% and add it to the monthly cost of financing, adding net zero on one of our homes costs just over $100 per month in financing cost. And the savings in utilities, now you have to average this over the year, because obviously in the summertime we've got higher solar production and lower heating loads, and the opposite in the winter. So if you average that over the year, it's $100. So the actual monthly cash flow in your pocket, because we do everything monthly, we pay our monthly cell phone, we get paid monthly, all these things, but people always think, well, what's the capital cost to buy it? But that doesn't really matter, because 99% of the people are financing their homes. So you have to look at it on a monthly cash flow basis, and it's essentially $0. And so what you'll get on your utility bill pays for that increase. But so maybe you're $0, so why do it? It's all those other value items. So for $0, you get that comfort, that quiet, that, all those other things. But it's interesting when you look at it in that sort of monthly cash flow perspective.
Yep. Nafis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually, so if you consider the cost-effective things, actually, then I think we need to consider the energy culture of our daily life. We have to emphasis on the energy conservation as well, because in our case, actually, we found that there are lots of energy losses here in our daily life. So if your citizen, your user are not aware about the energy losses, then I think it will not give you the actual result. So in that case, actually, now what happened, actually, we are putting some sensor to reduce the energy wastage. But if you put some partially sensor in partially in some equipments, then I think he thought that all of equipments is automatically shut down, like the TV. He forgot to turn off his TV. But if there is no sensor, then it will automatically consume electricity, like that. So I think in this regard, we need to say make our citizen, our people more aware about the energy losses. So I think it will help us to reduce energy cost.
Yeah,
Again,
thank you.
us, yeah.
The culture one, yeah, the culture I think is playing a big role. Through my conversation, also research, I came across of that kind of barrier or maybe misperception around the builders things that going to the net zero and any energy efficiency kind of the building, it would cost more customers at the kind of the life cycle of the building, and essentially that would kill the whole project and whole conversation. And now as Ken and also Chris, you're touching on point that so basically this is a misperception we need to address. And obviously Chris, you have done a great job in terms of bringing as a that what you're building in Avalon as a demonstration of, but basically we can trade off that cost, and also you're thinking about talking about the monthly cost rather than the whole capital cost overall, and that's a good message for the customers. Yeah,
like for instance Bobak, like is as Chris was also alluding to around like that cash flow aspect, because you're getting bank finance for this, for a lot of that's the reality for a large component of whether it's Australia, America, Canada, New Zealand, those kind of countries. And so for instance, from a marketing perspective, as a business development perspective, if you told your customer that yes, you do have a 5% premium on these kind of things, however, you're going to save in operational costs, you save over a month's mortgage every year.
Yeah.
How do you think that is as a pitch to your potential clients? Because they have to take that into serious consideration. It's like, wait a minute, what did you just tell me? You just told me that I'm going to be saving a month's mortgage. So that becomes, once again, like that becomes the reframing of it, because the money is available. It's about the people that are putting the product out there being able to fully articulate what are the opportunities to the client, and Naviz, I fully acknowledge that as I'm saying this in an Australian context, it might be a totally different economic situation in Bangladesh as well.
Yeah.
And you know, the impetus for net zero energy has, and I think you eloquently said this before, is around, you know, the reasons for even putting that on an agenda from a wider standpoint in Bangladesh is not necessarily just personal wealth. It's also just community energy cost, you know, business opportunities, and also pollution and stuff like that. You know, I really appreciate you putting that out there as well, because it's a very different argument depending on where we are and what global economies we're in.
Exactly. Yep. And also we're talking about obviously reducing the cost, definitely, you know, generating more energy as a kind of it can be cost reduction, or even the, you know, basically must be cost effective energy solution for generating more energy in order to, you know, subset that cost. What do you think about any kind of the generation of energy in a house? What's your experience? I know those topics are very close to each other. We can talk about that, and that's fine. But what sort of experience and also solutions you came across, especially Chris, from your projects for generating more energies?
Yeah, you know, this isn't generation, but the easiest and most cost effective is first to reduce the amount of energy. It's by far the most affordable thing to do. And you know, we've done quite a bit of solar thermal in the past, and we've gotten almost fully away from it because of the moving parts and the fact that photovoltaics has just gotten so affordable. I mean, it's a hard question to add more than that too, because it means that photovoltaics are just so inexpensive now. I was actually doing a similar thing, a similar conversation that we were having just this past week, and somebody asked, well, what about tracking? You know, like there's mechanisms out there that can help solar track the sun and capture so much more, but it's cheaper just to add more panels. And you know, whether that's the right way to look at it or not, I mean, that's just the reality. Is they're just so inexpensive nowadays. There's really nothing else that enters into it. And for us, I mean, we've definitely have wind, but in urban areas, it's really tough to take advantage of that as well. And again, there's a moving part. You know, we're going to talk about maintenance next. You know, any moving part you can remove is better. So.
Yep. See, anyone else view?
Yeah, in our case, actually, we from the government side, actually, we put some policies that if any building owner or developer want to get electricity connection, then he have to put some sort of a portion of renewable energy on his building. So in that case, actually, we are helping to increase the renewable energy generation. But still, it's a big challenge to ensure the alternative energy in buildings in our context, because it's costly. But if you say the statistics of LEED certified building, so Bangladesh, actually now we have almost 700 buildings under the LEED certified, and most of the high rank building we have, out of 10 we have 6 building a factory here in Bangladesh. I got the highest score of LEED certification. So from our previous discussion, that I can mention one thing, that in our context, high-end buildings, commercial and residential buildings, and some factories, actually they are willing to expend some additional money to save energy and got sustainability. So this is a good sign for us, because you know that our business community and our developer community, they are more concerned about energy cost and sustainability, which is a good thing. And even the buyers or building buyers actually for high-end building, because for last 10 years what we found that mostly a high-end building actually has a good customers. The building with more sustainable technologies and features, they are getting more market benefits. So that's why our developer are focusing on these sort of sustainable issues. They actually, even they are using that tagline that is green building, green architecture for green sustainability. So this sort of tagline they are using for their business purpose also. So I think this is a good sign in one case, but it also has another part, because that the market is not ready in that sense, because most of the equipment technology we have to import from other countries like China and US and other countries. So this is so we also need to focus on this sort of market availability of these sort of technologies. So even they are also expensive. Even the taxation issues also there. Even if you see the double glazing, so in our case, the double glazing is most efficient, but taxation is higher than ordinary glazing. So we also need to focus on that sort of things. Even I think it is equally applicable for other countries as well, that this sort of energy efficient technologies equipment should be lower taxes and import duties.
Yep. Ken, anything else from you?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Steve, for the context. Chris and Naviz, really appreciate that. In terms of the Australian context, there is no more. There's nothing more cost effective than solar panels, PV. Like I said before, anyone who actually builds a home, just talking about residential scale here in Australia, anyone who does not include that is actually actively losing money. You're losing money. But the type of the thing that gets a little bit conflated a little bit here is because technology changes like so rapidly now that some people get really tied up into what's the latest technological advancement. And so like even in the solar sphere, you'll have glass integrated PV, also like building integrated PV, so PV that's integrated into the roof panels and all this other kind of stuff. And like, for instance, batteries, so for batteries for single homes and stuff like that. One thing that I'll just put out there, just for your network or in your community, Bobak, is that the solar PV not only is becoming more efficient, but in terms of like just the longevity of it, it's skyrocketing, right? So there's a lot of innovation in that space. However, the PV integrated building materials like cuts the efficiency in half again. So now all of a sudden those they're kind of like playing catch up to how good the solar PV products are becoming. So then it becomes like this thing is that if you're going to max out and want to be net zero energy, you might as well max out on PV array. And then in the Australian context, the battery, it's still like a 10-year upfront payment of energy costs. So really, but we still need energy capture, right? Energy capture is actually a lot more affordable when it's shared. It's the same thing as like rainwater capture and stuff like that as well. So like, for instance, that's why it's actually pretty good to be connected to the grid, because nowadays the energy retailers are becoming very sophisticated in the way that they also include people to, buy back energy, be part of like a smart grid, But once again, that's a little bit too far out of the realm, too far out of the realm for like single use residential. But if for your network that is probably developers, maybe they should be thinking about if they do townhomes. I mean, I don't know if Chris is coming against this because you're doing multi-unit residential as well. Is there's opportunities of saving for every single one of those purchasers if you have like 10 apartments, 10 townhomes where you have shared infrastructure. The risk there is that people hate strata.
Yeah.
you know, it's like you want to cut them a deal by doing this shared infrastructure and saying like, look, your energy costs are going to be even less because now you share the cost of one battery and like this smart grid network. But then they're like, oh, if we have a problem with it, then we have to share the maintenance costs as well.
Yeah.
And then everyone gets in these kind of fights. So that's why it's always easier to sometimes just give everyone individual systems rather than thinking about that governance, which I think is like a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm also just highlighting that to once again add a little bit of humor in there because human behavior can sometimes be working against itself.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Especially when they're talking about, you know, even the, let's say, neighbors, you know, they're living in the kind of the well-established houses. They can have some sort of the shared, let's say, energy, solar panels or the batteries, rather than just having a townhouse. They can do that, but it just comes down to whether they wanted to do it together or not. And I really miss that Hamid is coming from the academic side that's working on the wind, kind of the energy, basically generation, as well as that he has actually worked on the energy of generation for the urban areas, like big cities. He has done some great work on that space, but we are missing him in that space. But that's a good conversation here. What about, you know, we're talking about this energy generation in terms of the missing opportunities. I just wanted to make sure from someone as a developers or even the builders, basically needs to deliver that energy efficiency, right? How does the energy modeling works in here? How we can measure the current, let's say, energy of the house if you're trying to renovate the house, or if you need to build a new house, how we can measure that energy generation and also saving. I just wanted to know the energy modeling in that side, because that's another thing I came across of talking to developers and also builders. They are not seeing the value of energy modeling before jumping to the, you know, construction side. Just wanted to get your perspective in here.
Yeah, I probably forget to talk about it because I never thought about not doing it. It's such an important aspect. I mean, and even going back to the energy, sort of the cost-effective energy reduction. I don't know why I didn't bring that up, because it is the #1 thing. If you haven't done that, yeah, I don't know how you figured out what you were going to do. But yeah, modeling, we essentially take the specification of the home, the volume of the home, the size of the home, and then we can sort of slide things around and say, well, if I thicken my wall a little here, can I reduce this thing over there? And the modeling allows you to do that. And the data points that they use to create this software, it's immense. So it's actually it's very accurate. And there's sort of one variable, which is air tightness, that you know, that's something that you have to. It's a little harder. You know, you can put a bat of insulation in, or this, you know, or that, but the air tightness is something that you really need to focus on. And you know, a whole bunch of little holes, you put all those together, and it's like just leaving a window open. So so yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
And also, I just wanted to touch on the role of the architecture as well as civil engineers in that space, how they're playing a role in energy efficiency, and then I'll talk about that with Ken and Nafis. Yeah. How they're playing the role in that energy modeling, architecture as well as the civil engineers.
Would you like to talk to that at all, Navis?
Chris, if you have any.
Hello.
Or Nafis, yeah.
Yeah, I think he has covered most of things actually. But yes, the architects definitely, architect and engineer, they have a huge role, because you know that for if you ensure that actual.
You're mute, Nafis. You got me.
Yeah.
I can hear you now.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
I think my one phone call came and then it was interrupted.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, so if we consider the actually sustainability buildings and go for the net zero energy building, then we have to consider the whole life cycle of a building. Otherwise, it's a partial. Now, actually, now we are actually talking about the net zero energy building. It's basically bill audit of a building, actually say audit of a building. So it's plus minus of electricity bill. So in single definition, we can say this is net zero energy buildings. If the annual billing is zero, then it's okay. But if you consider the whole building life cycle, then you will find the actual scenario and picture of a building. So for that, that's why actually we try to do some energy modeling as well, energy and other modelings. We took the help of different software, and it shows us that some potential of energy savings. And energy savings is important in our case, especially in Bangladesh case, is very important because we have to import all energy sources from other countries. Like we have to import the coal, we have to import for the gas. Even now we are shortage of natural gas to generate electricity, so we are importing LNG. So it will increase day by day. The energy cost always increase. But if you want to reduce your cost, energy cost, then there is no alternative to of energy efficiency. So this first thing in our case, actually now we are considering the energy efficiency second fuel in our case. Actually, the first fuel is used for generation, and efficiency we are considering a second fuel from your government policies. In that case, actually we have set some target up to 2030, 15% of energy efficiency we will ensure from our buildings, all buildings, industrial and residential commercial buildings. And in this regard, we introduced 3 policies. The first thing is energy audit for industries. Then green building rating system. As you know that LEED certification is very much popular here in Bangladesh. But beside that, now we are trying to introduce our own rating system, green building rating system, building energy and environment rating. We are calling it BEED, BEED. And then we are also introducing the energy efficient financing. Financing is very important for any sort of work, and because you know that without financing, people are not getting interested to buy this sort of expensive thing. And finally, we are also introducing the energy labeling program of, you know, that yes, the countries like Australia, Canada, and other US, they have the most of the all product labeled product, start labeling other product. But in our case, actually, we are far behind this sort of thing. So now we are trying to introduce this sort of thing, you know. So holistically, it's a good. We are in the. My perception is we are in right track to achieving the energy efficiency target. But beside that, it also increased the business opportunities of some businessmen or developer here in Bangladesh. So I think nowadays for this sort of policies, the investors, mostly from China and even from Australia, they came here for renewable energy investment and also energy efficiency equipment. They came up with some energy efficient equipments, and also now some companies actually they are also showing interest on the rooftop solar program. Yeah, so this I think it's a good business opportunity as well.
That's cool, man. Thank you for that.
I hope I don't ruffle a lot of feathers with what I'm about to say, but in terms of modeling, right? Like, yes, okay. Look, I know there are difficulties in sort of making sure that there is a modeling program that can effectively simulate everything that was going to happen, right? However, if you don't do that at all, you actually don't know anything about what you're creating from a standpoint around, you know, how it will perform, whether that's energy, thermal comfort, acoustic comfort, all this other kind of stuff. So the reason why I want to preface this by saying that I hope I don't ruffle any feathers is that if the builders or developers who actually say that, oh, I don't believe in the building simulation sort of aspect, it's because you actually probably already haven't done it and you actually don't understand it, and that's why you're bagging it. Building simulation could actually unlock a lot of data for you, and if you're really thinking about it from a business development standpoint, that is actually what can give you the intrinsic detail of how you actually sell or pitch your product to a potential client. For example, I worked with a local South Australian builder here. They were also looking into net zero energy homes. They didn't want to go a full conversion. They were thinking, oh, we'll probably do like 50% of what we're kind of do. We'll try to say that we have a product and try to get at least 50% of our customers annually over onto the net zero energy train. And then some just keep on doing what we've been doing, and don't worry about things like, modeling them and being able to communicate what are the actual benefits, like how much will you actually save, like to the dollar amount. Okay, it's like $100 amount, not just like licking your finger, putting it in the air and trying to figure out where the wind goes. And this is a specific IP, okay? But once we did the modeling on this, and then we did about 5 to 6 different of their offerings in terms of designs, which could be infinitely adaptable. Then they had a sales pitch for every single one of their models and then they're like, oh, we can get every single one of them on net zero energy. And okay, now that we have this information, we're actually not even scared about no more of the business as usual what we did before. We're now going all net zero energy, because why wouldn't we do that? We're telling everyone that they're going to save at least $2,000 in operational cost per year, energy and water. You take out natural gas, you don't even have to pay for a natural gas connection. Like that's a capital 10 grand cost in South Australia just to even have a meter on your house. Like, it's that kind of stuff that if you want to be like, look, everyone is allowed to have the opportunity to just stay mediocre. But what I'm also going to tell you is that in Australia, you're going to hit, it's already been announced that the Australian building code is going to be trending toward net zero energy as a minimum standard, like after 2030. So if you're not getting your head around it now, like you're actually creating a much more of a risk for your own business in the future. So once again, it's sort of like this thing around net zero energy might be coming into the nomenclature, so to speak, of the industry. But if you don't get your head around it now and then sink your teeth into building simulation, understanding what are the specific details you need for air tightness, what are the different specs, the bare minimum specifications that you need to really think about, being able to say, oh, we're going to offer this much for capital cost, but then this is what the financial return is going to be. If you don't do that work now for your offerings, you're going to be in a very tough spot.
Yeah, makes sense.
Can we sorry, we set a goal, I think it was somewhere around 2001 or 2002, that we would build all homes net zero by 2015. And for a number of reasons, we didn't get there. We don't build all homes net zero. So that's 13 years. And we're saying by 2030, we have to build all homes net zero or net zero ready, based on the building code. That's what the trend is now. And that's only 8.5 years. So if in 13 years we didn't figure out how to make it work, and again, if everyone's building that way, that maybe it changes it, but the point is 8.5 years isn't very far. And if you haven't built at least one by now, it's going to get really expensive.
Yeah, just summarize it in that sense that what you're saying is the perception from the builders and probably from some developers is net zero energy is a future trend. What you're saying is pretty much now. It's the current trend. Just need to catch up with that. And yeah, as you said, just need to build up the house. And especially for building simulation, I think that's a missing part. And as you pointed out very well, as a gap for builders to get their head around that, because another part is how you're going to measure it is an ongoing basis from a maintenance point of view. I'm glad that you're pointing out a couple of topics in here in terms of the market adoptions as a value proposition and also the maintenance part. This energy modeling gives them kind of the baseline, right, in order to maintain that net zero energy in ongoing basis.
Absolutely correct. Yep. Absolutely correct.
And what they need to do as a customers, let's say, put the customer hat as a kind of the the homeowners, what they need to do from maintenance point of view in terms of keeping the house net zero energy overall, let's say 1 year, 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone?
Ken, do you want to go first? Do you want to go first on this one, or
yeah, sure.
In terms of the maintenance, like this is the other interesting thing around, if you're thinking about like sustainability and stuff like that, you need to get details quite good, right? And if you do actually become a little bit more detailed oriented, there actually will be less maintenance for your homeowner. Because like, for instance, if you actually do, lay the insulation right and pack it in and all this other kind of stuff, no one has to rip down a wall again to redo it. If you actually fill in the gaps around the window frame, between the window frame and then whatever, like the wall structure that surrounds it, and then you just fill it in, then once again it won't create issues where you have to go back and do the maintenance. If you do a very good air membrane, then you probably won't have a lot of mold issues or condensation issues and stuff like that. This is what Chris was alluding to before as well. Once again, like all these different aspects, once again, this does come down, this does cost, in terms of time. However, if you're also communicating that, soon people will realize is that if builders and developers don't actually have that key sense of detail to their work, why would they be investing with them anyways? So the way that I see it is that sustainable design actually is actually just better design, good design anyways. So if you want a market advantage from that standpoint, that's prime for you. In terms of the user, like the building maintenance, it's quite usual stuff. If you have an air conditioner right now, you're still gonna have to clean the filters, all that other kind of stuff. If you have a solar panel array, you gotta check the performance, making sure that it's not there's a trip wire or anything like that. But other than that, you're building out of materials that you're already currently you see in every single house. Like if you need paint, you need paint. Like there's no, it's not like these are like a whole new like spaceship. The net zero energy homes are exactly the same as every single home. There's just different components to it in terms of the detail to it that that get it there.
I see. Thank you. And I just wanted to make sure before we jump into another speaker, can we see our videos or not really now?
Oh, I lost you. So. Go back.
Yeah.
I lost you in the presentation, but I've still got the panel.
Yeah, and in terms of
oh, you're back. You're back.
Yeah.
Back. Okay. All right. Just wanted to say, Chris, you and also Nafis, I'm just conscious about the time, but that I'm glad that you basically covering the market adoption side as well as the examples on your talking. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay. Hello.
Hello,
actually,
yeah.
I have different experience. Some interesting experience regarding net zero energy building. Recently, I have developed one. Most of these are first building in our country, which is going to be the net zero energy office building. So before that, actually, the office owner, building owner, they don't have the electricity connection, grid connection. So they used a diesel engine for diesel generator for their electricity. But then I suggest them to go for solar panels, and they got interested, and we put some solar panel on the roof. So before that, actually, they don't have any extra additional people to their maintenance of this sort of thing. But now they have to employ 2 people to clean the solar panels like every morning, and they use some water. And so after 2 weeks, I went there and to visit the building owner, and he said, "Oh man, what you have done for me! That it's before that I don't require any people. That now have to employ 2 person to clean up the solar panels every day morning, and it requires water, it requires huge maintenance. But then I told him that, okay, actually, so now it also not part of maintenance. So you actually, it's an opportunity for employment of 2 people, because you engage 2 people. But if you consider the cost saving, it saves huge amount of cost. So I think the maintenance is required for net zero building. I think in our case, what we found, it required huge maintenance than ordinary building. Because of solar panels, you need to clean up because you have dust, huge dust. But it may also increase the employment opportunity, as it is saving the huge energy cost. So I think it's better. It's a cost saving. So I think this maintenance is not much a problem. I think it's a we
Great,
can
thank you.
manage this sub maintenance. Yeah.
Yep. Just wanted to make sure that you're hearing me well enough, because I could see that kind of broken down.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yep. All right, Chris.
You can hit it.
Just wanted to jump to the Chris
perfectly.
and also jumping to the audience if there is any questions or comments.
Yeah, it can hit it perfect for my experience. I mean, you have a thermostat. You just happen to be controlling something that's probably more efficient. You may have an extra piece of glass in your window that doesn't take any more. Solar panels, I mean, my experience of this is the rain cleans them. Like I find the question really is very common, in that a lot of people think that it must take a lot of effort. But these homes are exactly the same, and the durability piece that Ken was talking about, likely if you're building a net zero home, it's probably you have more of attention to detail, and it is likely you're not going to run into those issues because you have an attention to detail. You have to build these net zero homes. So more likely than not, it's going to be a better experience as far as maintenance goes and longevity of the home. So I'll leave it at that. I think Ken and Viz hit it well.
And I just wanted to touch point on Naviz's point around the tech kind of side of things, for like in terms of like solar. Yes, there is a maintenance kind of standpoint of that, but if you actually design the angle correctly, you shouldn't actually need a lot of maintenance on there. For example, some of the studies in terms of like the longevity studies, like quantified data, you know, coming out of some of these Australian universities around solar energy, is that there's not a big drop in efficiency, even if you didn't even clean it for like years. You know, like good practice is that someone goes up there and just, you know, does a quick little wash of those things. But with solar, the thing that, like, in terms of like dust, maybe some like leaves and stuff like that, it actually nowadays, because the efficiencies are much higher, you get much more kilowatt punch out of every single panel. Like Chris also mentioned earlier, is like just oversize it, and then you take away all of the efficiency drops over like 10 years of it. And by that time, in 10 years, you're going to need to change the inverter anyways. So take that opportunity to just wash the panels down. Panels last about like 25 to 30 years. Most warranties are about like at the 20-25 year mark. Look, it's that kind of side is simple. The part that becomes a little like, I'll admit, the bits, and Chris alluded to this as well, is that if there's any moving parts, like for instance, if you have shading that you kind of like open and close, something's gonna break if it moves. You know, it's just like our knees, man. We get old, our knees break down because it keeps on moving around. It's the same thing. It's like anything with moving parts can be problematic. But solar, don't worry about the solar. Like nowadays, it almost doesn't matter which way you face them too. It's like, it's incredible what they're doing. It's incredible what they're manufacturing now.
Oh, you're muted, Bobak.
I was about to say, did we lose Bobak?
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
I have to see that. Just wanted to make sure anyone has got any comments or questions in here before we jump into adoption side and also the use case scenario. If it's not, feel free to make your comments in here. Just watching the chat box. Yeah, Rachel, if you wanted to add something.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel. I work with Bobak at BlueScope Steel, and I've had the chance to, I guess, work in different parts of the projects that are happening at the moment, and got introduced to the Green Building Council of Australia as a what are we doing to really sort of drive that conversation at the sort of corporate, from the corporate perspective, as well as, you know, right down to someone who's a potential building occupant or a building owner. And I've just wanted to say, like, it's been really fascinating listening to everybody discuss what are the sort of different ways in which we could approach this. And I guess want to put it out there, like, this is a personal interest for me to actually be involved and be part of the conversation. What is some of your thoughts around how people could connect with some of the, like, some of the dialogue that's happening here? Because it's truly amazing and fascinating. I love how you've, you know, dropped into getting into design phase, double glazing, I guess the views on making sure solar is a big part of the conversation, especially for in Australia specifically, where it based on the climate, which, although there's so many different like climatic zones, as you sort of put it, Ken, like, you know, how do we sort of get people more involved in stuff like that, conversations like that?
Well, go ahead, Ken. Yep.
I hope it's okay if I respond, just because it's an
Sure,
Australian
yeah,
kind of like
sure.
context.
Yeah, that's right.
So what I've seen, the reason why I founded this organization called the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, which is a volunteer-run not-for-profit, is because those conversations don't really happen enough from an industry standpoint. So, you know, industry meaning like development industry. So, you know, whether it is property, real estate, builders, designers, engineers, those industry groups, once again, not to ruffle any feathers really, but they haven't really made sustainability a priority, because the reality is that they have to focus on what their industry needs to do to survive. Now that they know that sustainability and climate change is essential to the survival of their industry, now they're taking a little bit more of a bigger action plan toward it. So, like, for instance, if you're an architect, landscape architect, urban planner, construction, there's like these declare movements. So it's organizations that have declared that they recognize that there is a climate crisis and also a biodiversity crisis that intersects between those two. You can get involved with any of those, or kind of like declare movements here in Australia. That will put you in contact with other industry people that are very passionate about this space and want to do actually something. Now, of course, you also need to get very organized about that kind of stuff, and I think that is still yet to come. Now, in terms of national leadership, the Green Building Council obviously offers a lot of national leadership. But then it's very commercial, not really down to residential. Residential, you can see like Renew, which used to be called the Alternative Technology Association. They're very big on pushing this kind of agenda. And kind of like an umbrella organization that brings a lot of these players together is called ASBEC, the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Coalition or Community. I don't know, one of that thing.
Yeah.
ASBEC. and that tries to pull in like engineering, architecture, property all together to be like, you know, we need to address sustainability as a built environment sort of collective from that point. But the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, we try to create a conversation between the general public and the industry, because what we know is that the industry will never change unless the general public starts asking for something else. So it is a little bit of a chicken and the egg kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
but
actually really interesting.
It can actually happen simultaneously, as long as there is either national or local leadership in those kind of steering those questions.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ken.
Of course.
That's cool. Just wanted to touch point. Just conscious about time. We have got 5 minutes. In terms of the use case and also case studies and also the lesson learned from practical point of view, as Ken is talking about the industry views, that, you know, what are the gaps? What do you think in terms of the lesson learned from, and also the case studies that you're working or you came across of that? Chris, we can start from you.
Sure. Yeah. I think and I would call them, there's still challenges. You know, sometimes when you learn a lesson, you can adjust, but I think the things that remain a challenge, in my case, in multi-unit residential or higher density net zero, you know, orientation to building is obviously a really important thing. But then when you add density to it, you're trying to fit as many units on a site as you can. And so that pre-planning aspect becomes a really important thing. And sometimes you're unable to meet those density requirements that, you know, that the land is zoned to be at a certain density, and to hit that and be net zero, you know, that's something we're still working through. The second one is kind of related to that, and it's really our existing power grid. And I'm sure it's a little different for everybody, but probably the same. And so there's a couple things there. What if everyone was net zero? Things would probably blow up. I don't know. And even around planning for that, one of the big lessons learned that we had with our most recent multi-unit residential net zero was the way the design and engineering works is, what's our maximum production? And then from there, we plan. But the reality is, so you take your inverter size, and that determines what your transformer size, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is, we're never hitting full production that's going to hit that transformer. When we have lots of sun, we probably have a big cooling load, and you know, to have enough solar to make a big building like that net zero, we're having to utilize multiple aspects, and they don't produce at the same time. But you have to size it based on maximum, which is how big is the panel, how many are there, that's my inverter. So I think there's some learning that has to happen at the design and engineering side of things. Then, and in the end, we had to cut the number of net zero units in our buildings, because the way the math has to work from an engineering design perspective says X. But I think what we're going to learn in this specific one, it's actually a pilot that's being supported nationally, is we're probably not peaking out very often because we are utilizing a lot of it on site. And I'm not an electrical engineer, so maybe I'm wrong, but it'll be interesting to see. But that's, again, another one of the big challenges. And then I think the number one challenge, and where we're talking about, so I'm part of a council, Net Zero Council, that's a subcommittee of our Canadian home builders. I think it does similar things to what Ken's talking about, which is educating builders, whether that be construction practices or even sales and marketing practices. And in general, how do we do this? How do we build it? How do we get everybody building? But the if you build it, they will come isn't really a thing. We also really need to focus on how do we get our consumers to demand it. So rather than say you builder must do this, and that's coming, like, 2030, a lot of us are just going to have to do it, but that won't get us there soon enough. We need to educate people on how do we get there. And one of our biggest challenges around that is, if you go and buy a car, if you go to a dealership, it'll tell you what the fuel economy is of every single car. It's mandated. Every single one has to have a label, so you know if it's efficient or not. But in our home building world, it's optional. And probably the only people labeling, and that label says this is how many gigajoules this house is going to use, probably the people labeling are only the high performance ones. So that what's good versus better, and how helping our future homeowners and the general public understand how to compare from house to house. I think that's an even bigger challenge, and that's when we talk about what's the true value. It's not just about energy, it's about the health aspect, it's about the comfort aspect. And if I had to pick one of three, that's the number one thing for me is really mandated labeling, and then just in general putting more to supporting education to homeowners so they understand what they're buying and what they're comparing to.
Thank you.
Can I bounce off of that real quick? Because
Sure.
Chris, that is also another tidal wave that's going to be coming for the Australian development market, because whether they like it or not, and they're going to fight this kicking and screaming, but there's going to be a lot of mandatory disclosure of building performance. So at the moment, you only have to model the building's performance and put that into development approval to council, and then they'll give you a green tick, and then you could build whatever you want. And most of the times, a lot of builders, again, I'm sorry for ruffling feathers here, but they'll cut corners, not put enough insulation or not use the proper building wrap, even if they specified that in what they've submitted to council, right? So to combat this, and once again, people will think this is red tape, but this is actually more of consumer protection. That now through the building construction process, there's going to be something called a building passport, where you actually get checked off on things as you're building stuff to make sure they're in line with a quality that should be aligned with the building code. Okay, this is not just energy efficiency stuff. This is just straight that someone's paying hundreds of thousands of dollars on a mortgage and going into debt for this thing. They need to be protected. So this will be coming through.
That's
and
awesome.
then on top of that, once again, this is a long-term thing. This will be like 2030, but you should be getting used to this now. And then alongside that building passport thing, to make sure construction is legitimately doing what they're saying that they're going to be doing, right? Once again, for building minimum standard, there's also going to be start for the real estate sector that this is already happening in Canberra, which is like the capital territory of Australia. They already have a energy efficiency label for real estate. So depending on the thermal energy efficiency, as well as the active energy, which is like the heating, cooling, lighting, you're going to get a score on that. And this has already been in Canberra for 5 years. Victoria's already trialing it. It's going to come to South Australia, and it's going to go all over Australia. Okay, every single state is going to have this. And what that ends up creating is that real estate agents need to understand energy efficiency, which they're going to freak out about because they don't know shit about it. Sorry. And then two is that people that value, like, they're like, oh, I need to make sure I invest in something that's worthwhile me going in debt for. They're going to be like, oh, I'm going to make sure that it's energy efficient, because that's what resales, like in terms of the resale value, in terms of real estate, that is always higher. So,
Yeah.
once again, I know we're talking about this as like opportunities and stuff like that, but like these are and this kind of leads me into trying to just finalize this, kind of like my final comments, is that right now, net zero energy is for sure your big opportunity. You can get ahead of this and you can become a market leader, just like Chris is. or you can just wait it out and then you're going to be playing catch up. 2 is that it is actually a much better product for your client, which once again means you're going to be ensuring that you have a much more premium product or more quality product. Tick. In terms of marketing, yes. And then finally, this goes back into this. If you don't do it, you're absolutely fucked. I'm telling you that right now, because climate change is hitting every single financial investment kind of thing. If you don't think that will trickle down into the residential market, you're nuts.
Yep. So that's pretty good, strong message for the builders and developers in Australia. And Nafis, and anything from your side in terms of the lesson learned and also as the market opportunities? Anything as a final thing? We are going a little bit over time, but I'm enjoying that conversation. If you don't mind.
Yeah. Actually, my findings is that there's a big challenge is the financing and investment of this sort of thing, because in our case, most of the banks or financial institute, they are not. Though we have two financial institute, dedicated institute who actually invest on the renewable energy and energy efficiency here in Bangladesh, but most of the private banks are mortgage company, actually they are not that much willing to invest on this sort of renewable energy efficiency, because they don't understand this sort of thing. Is the first thing. This problem, big problem. And then second problem, what I found that the technology itself, it changes very fast. That last 5 years back, actually, what these panels we have imported here in Bangladesh, the efficiency was less. Now we actually imported importing from China. It's a higher efficiency. Even I believe that in next 5 years it will change. Then in twice, then it will require less space. So then my thought is that what we will do with this sort of solar panels, that if it required less space after 5 years, then we have to dump it in anywhere else. So I think so in my mind I'm also thinking of this sort of thing, that I am suggesting to my clients, to my building owners, to use solar panels today, and then after 2 years or 3 years, he will find the more efficient solar panels. It requires less space. Then what he will do with this sort of solar panels, because he will be less efficient. So I think this is a big challenge. I think in this sort of net zero energy building, and then because it required till today, the solar panels is much expensive in Bangladesh in terms of our context, because we have to import these panels from other countries. We are not generating or producing. So actually, we are in this dilemma here in Bangladesh.
Cool. It sounds like opportunities for the people who are selling solar panels. So
it's a big, even that most of big Chinese companies here, they have opened their office here in Bangladesh. They are selling, because the most of the textile sector, big industries, they are going for solar here in Bangladesh. They are going for big solar panel programs, in megawatt scale rooftop solar panels program here. So it's a good business opportunity now in Bangladesh, because we don't have any import duty for solar panels. It's totally waived. Even any entrepreneur want to make some solar park here, the taxation, corporate tax also relaxation for 5 years. So we have, our government is giving more emphasis on that and more incentive on that. So it is a good opportunity for business in Bangladesh in renewable energy sector, net zero energy sector.
Right. No, I really appreciate your conversation. Unfortunately, we're running out of the time right now. I have to stop the recording, and I'll stay on the call. I just give you 1 second.